Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. If you are new here, you heard me right. It is Crue Trime, not true crime. That's for boring people. My name is Sarah, and I'm here to tell you terrible stories to ruin your day while I put on makeup. In today's episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime! We are going back to the Buckeye State for a Halloween edition. This is the story of William BJ Liske. Before we get too far into today's story, let's talk to future me about today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by June's Journey. I'm actually really excited about this because this game is super fun. I wouldn't call myself a gamer. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do really enjoy a good mobile game. June's Journey is a hidden object mystery game that's set in the 1920s. It's available for free download wherever you prefer to play games, whether it's mobile, PC, Facebook, whatever. The point of the game is to find little objects that are hidden in the picture, and it gets harder with every round, and you're also discovering clues that help you solve this underlying murder mystery plot that runs through the whole game. And there's also a little side game where you are using the points and the rewards that you collect in the game to redeem and build out your estate, which is super fun. What's cool about this too is that once you put something down in your little estate, you can still move it. It's not like there forever. I don't know why I love that so much, but I do. So June's Journey is a great way to pass the time while you're just like waiting for your coffee to brew in the morning, or just to take a few minutes to sneakily exercise your brain. It's kind of like hiding vegetables in your cupcakes. Sneak in those good vitamins. You're really using your noodle when you're playing this game, but it doesn't feel like it. I like to play on an iPad just so it's a little bit bigger for my old lady eyes. And sometimes Tyler will like over my shoulder help me out, even though you're probably not supposed to do that, but shh, okay, it's quality time. Download June's Journey totally free using the link down in the description box, and you can have your own murder mystery right at your fingertips. And now, back to the Crue Trime. You guys, it's officially spoopy season. I mean, it's been spoopy season at our house since Labor Day. Today's story happened on Halloween, which makes it officially a spoopy Crue Trime. I mean, they're all spoopy, aren't they? On Halloween, Sunday morning, October 31st, 2010, 16-year-old Devin Griffin returned home to 7052 Jerusalem Road in Martin, Ohio. It's a tiny town southeast of Toledo. Fun fact, that's where my family's from. Most of my extended family lives in and around the Toledo area. Go Mud Hens! Actually, my grandpa's farmhouse is like less than 10 miles from where this happened, so small world, huh? Anyways, so Devin had spent the weekend with his dad. He sang in the choir at St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church in nearby Oak Harbor, and it was Sunday after all, so he quickly ran inside to change his shirt before he left for the 9:30 church service. So he was only home for like 5 minutes, but he did exchange a few quick words with his stepbrother, 24-year-old BJ Liske, who was unusually upbeat that morning. BJ asked Devin where he was going, how long he'd be gone, that sort of thing. So BJ didn't live with them anymore. Things had been deteriorating over the years. Drug use, violent behavior, mental illness, a lot of trouble. Things were just not good with BJ. Anyways, well, BJ's dad, Billy, had sent him to live at a group home in Sandusky. BJ was normally pretty dark and like brooding, so the interaction with Devin was a little weird, but he didn't think much more about it. So Billy and BJ had been trying to work through their issues. Bill had taken some time off of work, and they had gone on a hunting trip that weekend, and they had gotten back home late the night before, so BJ crashed on the couch, which explains why he was there so early when he didn't live there. So anyways, Devin hurried out of the house to get to church on time. After services, he went home and went straight upstairs to his bedroom to play video games, as you do. And around 1:30 p.m., he started wondering, where is everybody? He lived with his parents, of course. Well, it was his mom, Susan, and his stepfather, Billy, and he had a brother, Derek Griffin. So it shouldn't have been so quiet in the house. So Devin wandered downstairs to his parents' bedroom. They were still in bed, lying on their backs, and the covers were pulled up over their heads. At first, he started talking. Mom? Are you awake? He tapped her leg that was poking out from underneath the blankets. Nothing. Well, he kept talking to them, expecting them to jump up any minute. It's a Halloween prank, of course. It had to be. right? So he's kind of like doing the math, you know? He got home, he went right upstairs, hours have gone by, he's not hearing anything, and now he finds them in the bed, and no one's listening, no one's talking, no one's moving, nothing's happening. He's getting really uneasy, right? Come on, guys, it's not funny anymore. Ha ha ha. So he slowly pulled the covers down from his mom's side, like just a little bit, and then he saw her pillow soaked with blood. Well, there is nothing funny about this anymore, so he ran out of there, and he stopped by his brother's bedroom, but the door was locked, and he was like, fuck this, and he was out of the house. So he called his aunt, Lori Morse, telling her there was blood everywhere. Lori called the police, and she eventually came over. She didn't live very far away, but Lori immediately thought of Billy's dangerous son, BJ. Lori told the police that they'd had a lot of trouble with him and with the law, and that he had threatened Susie before. So let's back it up. So William Billy Liske was a U.S. Air Force veteran, and he worked as a front-end loader at Waste Management in Ottawa County, Ohio. Susie Liske was the office manager for Northwest Ohio Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee. Susie and Billy had both been previously married and had children. Susie had 2 sons and Billy had 1 son. They met when they both worked for Waste Management. Susie eventually took a different job. So Billy and Susie got married in 2001 when BJ was about 15 years old. BJ's relationship with Susie was never good. He resented her big time. He acted out, skipping school, all that jazz. So the first time that Billy Liske had called law enforcement regarding BJ's behavior was in 2002. A then 16-year-old BJ was threatening to hurt himself. He was on house arrest as well, and when police arrived, BJ attacked them. About 2 years later, in 2004, BJ got into a fight with his stepmother, Susie. He was screaming at her, and he hit her really hard in the chest, and somewhere in the scuffle ended up cutting her eye as well. He was later charged with felonious assault and robbery because at the time he stole the keys to her car. Anyways, those charges were eventually dropped when BJ was found incompetent to stand trial in Lucas County. Now that part is very interesting. It's like, why was he found incompetent to stand trial? No need to assume. Okay, BJ Liske suffered from schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and he took medication to manage it, which worked well for him. The problem is, once he would start feeling well and doing well, he would feel like he didn't have to take the medicine anymore, and then he would stop taking it, and then he would replace that with drinking alcohol, smoking pot, and then it would just cycle back into violent episodes. The situation at home had become so volatile, he'd even attempted to assault Susie as she showered one day. Billy couldn't have him there any longer, it wasn't safe, and BJ moved to a mental health group home in Sandusky. The physical fights and the violence followed. Well, neighbors would later tell investigators that they had suspected BJ of torturing and killing some of their pets. One neighbor's dog had been shot twice with .22 caliber bullets. You can just file that little nugget away for later. Family friend and neighbor Mark Gradell wrote in a report that Bill would often call him to help when BJ was having problems or when BJ was getting goofy. In 2006, Billy had filed for guardianship over BJ, who was legally an adult by then. Despite this pattern of violent outburst, Billy wanted to protect BJ, and he never stopped trying to get him the help he needed. As recently as June of that year, 2010, reports were filed with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department regarding domestic violence episodes involving BJ getting violent with his father, but then he would decline to press any charges. Mark said that he had had serious talks with Billy about his family's safety with BJ around, and Billy would just say BJ would never hurt them. So then what happened? Okay, so like I said earlier, Billy had taken some vacation time from work in late October 2010 so that he and BJ could spend some time alone in their family hunting cabin doing some deer hunting. So they had gone on this trip, and then they got home on Saturday night, October 30th. Things seemed to be really good. You know, they'd gotten some beers and they had a few friends over and everything was fine. Everyone was having a good time. They were just sort of like hanging out at the house. Now remember, Devin was away at his dad's house for the weekend. Susie's other son, 23-year-old Derek, he wasn't around that evening. Whenever BJ was around, Derek would just make himself scarce because they didn't get along. Well, at the end of the night, after they'd all been kind of drinking and hanging out, it wasn't a good idea, of course, to drink and drive, so Billy decided instead of taking him back to the group home in Sandusky, which was, like 30-ish miles away, something like that. Might be a little bit further now that I think about it. But anyways, they would just let him spend the night on the couch, which that was a rare event given BJ's long history of violent outbursts. So everyone else left around midnight or so, and everybody just wound down for bedtime. Derek's last known phone call was made earlier that afternoon around 2 p.m. Neighbor Mark Graydell's wife later told investigators that she heard what sounded like muffled gunshots at about 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, which would be consistent with the times of death. Sometime between midnight and when Devin came home, BJ had killed his father, Billy, his stepmother, Susie, and his stepbrother, Derek. Investigators say that Derek was probably killed first because he was found in his bedroom, locked bedroom, curled up on his bed facing the wall. Now, BJ must have attacked him while he was asleep because Derek was an athlete. He had a second-degree black belt, and he had competed in Italy for the U.S. Taekwondo team. Well, Derek had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and had likely died within a few minutes of the first blow, although he had been struck multiple times. A bloody hammer was found in the house consistent with Derek's wounds and with his blood on it. Who does that sound like? Well, with Derek effectively neutralized, BJ closed the door and locked it behind him and continued. So Billy and Susie were shot in their bed. Billy was shot 5 times at close range in the head and face. He was in a natural sleeping position, indicating that he was probably shot first. Susie was positioned oddly, like she had woken up and maybe tried to run away or something before she was shot 3 times at close range and then laid back down in the bed. It was also revealed later in the investigation that Susie had been sexually assaulted, and it's not clear if that happened before or after she had been killed. That might explain her odd positioning in the bed, who knows. Either way, once they were both killed, the bed sheet was then pulled up over their heads. Derek had been scheduled to work that Sunday, but when he didn't show up, his Aunt Lori called the house at 7 a.m. and then again at 9. So when Lori had gotten that panicked phone call from Devin that afternoon, she had already suspected that something was up. So when Devin had arrived home that morning, he was in and out of the house in like 5 minutes, remember? Based on the witness testimony regarding, the gunfire that was heard by the neighbor, BJ had likely already committed the murders when Devin had showed up that morning. And he even spoke to him, but just, I guess, decided to let him go. Well, after that, BJ took the family's Ford F-150 and drove back to the hunting cabin in Carroll County. A warrant was issued by Judge Kathleen Giesler, and the hunt for BJ was on like Donkey Kong. It's in Perry Township, which is like 170 miles away in Carroll County, like I said. So they went there to look for evidence because they knew that he and Billy had gone there recently, so they really went there to look for evidence, but they did strongly suspect that maybe that's where he had disappeared to. Well, once they were inside, they found a fresh, uneaten Subway sandwich on the counter. Security footage from the nearby Subway sandwich shop showed that BJ had just been there and bought the sandwich. So BJ was, of course, very quickly found, and he was still wearing the bloody clothes. He was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder, and the other murder counts and additional charges were added later as they worked through the investigation. So while he was being held at the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, there was a little bit of a scuffle. When he was being moved from the holding cell to the receiving cell, he had been directed to put on a suicide prevention smock, and he refused. He ended up punching and scratching one of the deputies in the face, and after they told him that they would zap him with the stun gun if he didn't stop fucking around, he complied. He was eventually transported back to Ottawa County to face the music, including psychiatric evaluation. The Liske family were avid hunters and they owned many firearms, which is not unusual, especially in Ohio. The .22 caliber bullets that were recovered from the crime scene were consistent with one of the firearms that they owned, although it was never recovered. There were muddy footprints found on the deck near their pond, and it suggests that the murder weapon was probably chucked into the water, although they did drain the pond. Nothing was found. How do you drain a pond? Side note. How? I guess they just go in there with a hose and suck it out? Somebody tell me. Seems like a lot of water. Anyways, they even brought in some specially trained canines to sniff around. They never found anything. As you can imagine, the Liske family was totally shattered. In an instant, they had lost 3 family members to a brutal murder, and I mean 4 if you think about it, because they'd lost BJ as well. But as they were grappling with the unreal circumstances of this case, they got even more bad news. So unrelated to the murders, Billy Liske's sister, Sue Dunmire, she was killed the next day when the detached garage of her home in Oregon caught fire while she was inside of it. Now, late October in Northeast Ohio is pretty cold, and they normally have lake effect snow by that time of year, and her house was like right up on Maumee Bay. So Sue would often smoke inside her garage. Oregon police said that the garage had lawn equipment inside, including cans of gasoline, but other reports say that the garage was also a living space and it had a stove and a furnace. Either way, I mean, it was just a terrible accident, and it just piled on to the tragedy for this family now grieving the loss of 5 people in the span of one day. So interestingly, a Port Clinton judge ruled that BJ was competent to stand trial despite his long history of mental illness. This had BJ facing the death penalty if he was convicted of the killings. When BJ appeared in court for the arraignment, that's when a person is formally advised of the charges made against them, and then they enter their plea, like guilty, not guilty, no contest. He was charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder. 3 of the counts allege that they were committed with prior calculation, and 3 counts say that they were committed in the commission of aggravated robbery. Remember, he took the family's vehicle. BJ Liske initially pled not guilty to all of the charges. In the hearing, BJ showed no emotion, but he made statements that indicated remorse and regret, and he wrote letters to his extended family to apologize. In a letter sent to his cousin, BJ wrote, quote, "I wish this terrible thing would never have happened. I hope you and everyone else will eventually find peace and happiness through God's grace and try to forgive me. Tell everyone I said hi and that I love them and I'm very sorry." A month later, BJ pled guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder in a plea agreement that dropped the lesser charges. Details from the murders were read aloud in court, and it was revealed that BJ had implicated himself in a jailhouse phone call he'd made to his mother shortly after he was arrested. She had read a newspaper articles about the murders to him over the phone and said, "You did it. You did this. You did all of this." And BJ was like, yeah. The Liske family gave victim impact statements in the courtroom. Aunt Lori, Susie's sister, the same Aunt Lori that Devin had called on Halloween, said that they just wanted to understand why. She said, quote, "I will never get the events of that day out of my head. We feel such crippling grief." When BJ was given the opportunity to speak, he talked about Satan and his struggle with mental illness. And when he had thought back to what he had done, it made him physically sick. He said that Satan was and still is trying to destroy his soul. Quote, "I cannot explain why it happened, only my eternal struggle with mental illness caused by the devil. I want to say I'm extremely sorry. It's all my fault. I don't blame anyone but myself and the devil." On September 9th, 2011, William BJ Liske was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It gets sadder, though, because on March 31st, 2015, a then 29-year-old BJ Liske was found dead in his cell at Ross Correctional Institution in Chillicothe from a self-inflicted injury. That is the story of BJ Liske. That was intense, you guys. And a true Halloween horror story. I know I get shady when it comes to murderers, and I always say they deserve it, but it's very clear that this guy was suffering severely from some serious mental health struggles. If you or someone you know is struggling with a mental health crisis, I have included some resources down in the description box. Hotlines, emails, text lines, websites, whatever might be most comfortable for you. Help is out there, friends. Thanks again to June's Journey for sponsoring today's episode of Crue Trime. If you're interested to know what makeup I used or where I got my shirt or anything else that you see that you might like, just check down in the description box. Everything is linked just for you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the socials that you see right here. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! BJ Liske. These fucking loud ass cars just ruined my life. Thanks again to Journ's Journey. Only my eternal struggle. 22 caliber. I cannot talk today. What the fuck is this squeaks? 22 caliber. Shot twice with 22 caliber. Can't say caliber. Caliber with 22 caliber. If you're interested to